Most men navigate life perpetually confused, scratching their heads in the aftermath of a relationship's end, trying to piece together a puzzle that seems to have no logical solution. They are haunted by the disconnect between the woman they thought they knew and the one who ultimately left. They replayed the memories like a broken record, torturing themselves with unanswerable questions. Didn't she mean it when she looked into my eyes and promised forever? Wasn't it real love? When she cried in my arms, sharing her deepest vulnerabilities? The sincerity in those moments felt absolute, and that's what makes the sudden shift so devastating. The man operates from a framework where words are bonds and actions are measurable evidence of commitment. In his world, a promise is a contract. And love is a stable structure built brick by brick through consistent effort and loyalty. He believes in a shared objective reality where facts are king and the past informs the present. The painful truth he must grasp is that her world operates on an entirely different operating system. For her, in those moments of intense emotion, every word was utterly true. But her reality is not built on the bedrock of permanence and logic. It is built on the ever-changing landscape of feeling. Her emotions are not just reactions to her world. They are the very architects of it. When she feels adored and secure, you are her soulmate, and the future is bright. When a feeling of neglect, boredom, or dissatisfaction arises, whether triggered by an external event or an internal shift, she may not even understand that emotion becomes her new truth. It overrides yesterday's reality. The man who was her forever yesterday is today the source of her unhappiness, not because of a factual change in his behavior, but because her emotional lens has changed focus. This is the core of the blindness that men experience. They are trying to apply the rules of their own world, a world of cause and effect, of evidence and reason, to a world that functions on an entirely different set of principles. He brings facts to a feeling fight, points to the receipts, the dates he planned, the sacrifices he made, the logical consistency of his actions, utterly bewildered when she dismisses them. To him, this is irrefutable proof. To her, it is irrelevant data because it does not align with what she feels in the present moment. This fundamental dissonance is why men are so often sideswiped by breakups, cheated on despite being loyal providers, or ghosted after what seemed like a perfect weekend. They are speaking the language of logic to someone who hears only the language of emotion. The initial stage of a relationship is often less about two people truly seeing each other and more about a powerful projection. A woman frequently falls in love not with the actual flawed man standing in front of her, but with the potential he represents and the story she is eager to write. In the beginning, you are not a person, but a blank canvas onto which she projects her deepest desires and most cherished fantasies. You are perfect, not because you are, but because she has not yet seen you clearly, imagines the life you will give her, the constant emotional highs you will provide, and the fairy tale romance you will act out together. You become the hero in a narrative she has been writing in her mind long before you arrived, a story crafted from a lifetime of cultural messages, romantic ideals, and personal yearnings. This fantasy is powerful and feels completely real, but it is inherently fragile because it is not based on substance. It is built on the excitement of potential and the intoxication of newness. However, reality is persistent and always eventually arrives. It shows up in the form of your very human flaws, the fact that you get stressed from work, that you sometimes need quiet time alone, that you leave socks on the floor, or that you cannot sustain a state of romantic fervor 24 hours a day. It appears as the inevitable boredom that settles in after the initial spark fades. When comfortable routine replaces dizzying excitement, she begins to realize you are not a character in her story, but a complex, independent human being with your own needs and imperfections. This is the critical juncture, the moment her carefully constructed fantasy collides with the unyielding wall of reality. For many women who live primarily in the world of emotion, the collapse of this fantasy is not seen as a natural transition into a deeper, more mature love. Instead, It is interpreted as a failure on your part. She believes you have changed, that you have let yourself go, or that you stopped trying. In her mind, the perfect man she fell for has vanished, replaced by someone disappointing. The painful irony is that you were always this same man. You were simply obscured by the glow of her projection. She blames you for the death of the illusion, not her own imagination for creating an unsustainable one in the first place. This is the source of those bewildering contradictions she voices. She wants a strong leader, but also expects him to be guided by her emotions. She desires a provider, but scorns the practical focus and time required to provide. She asks for vulnerability, but can lose respect when she perceives it as weakness. These are not calculated lies, but authentic expressions of a desire for a perfect, feeling a desire for a man who can somehow embody all things at once, fulfilling every emotional need simultaneously without contradiction. She is chasing a holistic emotional high, not logical compatibility. The moment that high becomes elusive, when the feelings of excitement and perfect union fade, her entire story changes. The narrative she once swore was eternal is rewritten to match her new emotional state. Justifying her distance or her exit, when a woman's emotional reality shifts, a man's most natural and instinctive response is to engage the problem with the tools he trusts most, logic and reason. He sees her pulling away, expressing dissatisfaction, rewriting the history of their relationship, and he believes clarity is the solution. He meticulously gathers evidence like a lawyer building a case. He points to the tangible proofs of his love and commitment, the receipt from the vacation he paid for, the text messages where she proclaimed her happiness, the fact that he works long hours, not for himself, but to provide for their future. He lays out a timeline of events, a logical sequence of actions that, in his mind, should definitively disprove her feelings of neglect or unhappiness. He argues with facts, believing that if he can just present them clearly enough, she will have a moment of clarity and snap back to the shared reality they once inhabited. This approach is not just ineffective, it is actively destructive to the connection. It is the equivalent of trying to use a map to navigate a dream. In her world, feelings are not just emotions. They are the foundational data upon which her entire reality is constructed. If she feels neglected, then neglect is her objective truth, regardless of any contradictory evidence. Your facts, your receipts, your logical arguments are not just dismissed. They are often perceived as invalidating and even hostile. To her, you are not proving a point. You are telling her that her deepest reality is wrong. This feels like a profound lack of empathy, which only deepens her sense of isolation and confirms her feeling that you just don't get it. Your rational defense becomes, in her emotional framework, an attack. This creates a vicious cycle that erodes a man's sense of sanity. He enters the conversation confident in his position, armed with irrefutable evidence, only to find himself facing a wall of feelings that his logic cannot penetrate. Her responses seem to defy all reason. She might dismiss a concrete example by saying, "But that's not how it felt." Or she might use his own evidence against him, you see. "You're just keeping score now. That's not real love." The goalposts of the argument move with every sentence, because the argument itself is not about facts, but about a fleeting, emotional state. The man who started the discussion seeking resolution ends it in a state of utter confusion and self-doubt. He begins to question his own perception of events, wondering if he is somehow missing something obvious. He exhausts himself trying to bridge a gap that cannot be crossed with words, trying to build a stable structure on shifting sand. He is speaking the language of engineering to someone who is composing poetry. Both are valid forms of expression, but they are utterly incompatible for the task at hand. The more he fights to pull her into his world of logic, the more she retreats into her world of emotion, and the wider the chasm between them grows. This battle doesn't just fail to solve the problem, it becomes the problem itself, reinforcing the very disconnect it was meant to heal. The only path to stability in the face of a shifting emotional landscape is to build an unshakable foundation within yourself. Your survival and sanity depend on constructing your own world, anchored in purpose and truth, before you invite a partner into it. A man who lacks his own mission, standards, and core identity is like a ship without a rudder. He will be effortlessly tossed and ultimately capsized by the storms of her emotions. The goal is not to control her feelings or force her to see your logic, but to become so grounded in your own reality that her changing moods cannot destabilize you. This internal fortitude is what protects you and, paradoxically, becomes the very thing that can create a safe harbor for a healthy relationship. To eventually form, the first and most crucial skill is to learn to trust actions over words. In a world governed by fleeting emotion, words are often spoken with sincere intensity but have no permanent weight. They are a reflection of the present feeling, not a binding contract for the future. Promises of forever, declarations of loyalty, and tearful proclamations of love are true in the moment they are uttered, but they are not a reliable predictor of future behavior. The only reality you can truly bank on is consistent action. Does her behavior, over time, align with loyalty, respect, and peace? Does she treat you with consideration when she's happy and when she's upset? When her words and actions contradict when she says she loves you but acts with disrespect, or promises commitment while pulling away? You must believe the actions every time. Arguing about the words is pointless. Instead, calmly observe the behavior and make your decisions based on that concrete evidence. This is how you avoid the whiplash of believing every passionate promise only to be devastated when it vanishes with her mood. This observation naturally leads to the necessity of enforcing clear, non-negotiable boundaries. A woman's testing is not always a conscious manipulation. It is often an instinctive probe to determine the strength of the man she is with. She will push to see if you will bend your values, tolerate disrespect, or abandon your own goals too. Pacify her emotional state. The man who folds under this pressure, who seeks to maintain harmony at any cost, signals that he is adrift in her world and has no core of his own. He becomes a slave to her moods. In contrast, the man who calmly and consistently upholds his standards, who communicates what he will and will not accept without anger or need for approval, demonstrates a profound strength. He proves that his reality is solid and cannot be rearranged by external drama. While she may initially rage against these boundaries, deep down, they provide the very structure and safety that her chaotic emotional world lacks. This is not about being rigid or domineering. It is about being principled and predictable, which is the antithesis of emotional chaos. Ultimately, this entire approach is underpinned by a state of detached engagement. Detachment is frequently misunderstood as coldness or indifference. In truth, it is the ultimate form of emotional control and self-possession. It means you can be fully present and caring in a relationship without letting her emotional state dictate your own sense of worth or reality. When she pulls away, you don't panic and chase. You give her space and focus on your own mission. When she tests, you don't react emotionally. You respond from a place of calm principle. This detachment is your greatest shield. It allows you to observe the storm from a place of shelter without feeling the need to run out into the rain and shout at the wind. By refusing to be drawn into the chaos, you remain rooted in your truth. In this unwavering calm, this unshakable center, is ironically the most attractive and stabilizing force you can offer, demonstrating that you are the anchor she unconsciously seeks, the final and perhaps most liberating realization a man must come to is that not every woman is capable of meeting him in the world of reality. Some are so deeply invested in the perpetual chase for emotional highs, so addicted to the dopamine rush of new fantasies, that they are unable to appreciate the profound value of stability and truth. They drift from one spark to the next, mistaking the intensity of initial infatuation for lasting love, and inevitably blaming each partner when the inevitable fade occurs. This is a path of their own choosing, fueled by an internal void they are trying to fill with external validation. If you encounter a woman like this, Understand that no amount of logic, patience, love, or sacrifice on your part will ever be enough to anchor her. Your love will be seen not as a foundation to build upon, but as a cage limiting her pursuit of the next feeling. To try and save her from herself is a fool's errand that will only result in you drowning alongside her in a sea of her own illusions. The strongest and most clarifying move you can make in such a scenario is to let her go. This is not an act of bitterness, anger, or pettiness. It is an act of profound self-respect and clarity, a simple acknowledgement that your world and hers are incompatible. You are not built to be a temporary character in someone else's ever-changing story. You were built to be the author of your own, to build something tangible and lasting in the real world. Releasing her is not a loss. It is a necessary act of protection for your own peace, purpose, and sanity. It is the recognition that you cannot negotiate desire or debate someone into valuing what you offer. Either she recognizes the strength of your reality and chooses to join you in it, or she doesn't. Your power lies in accepting her answer without internalizing it as a reflection of your worth. When you stop orienting your life around the tempest of a woman's emotions and instead pour all that energy into building your own mission, a fundamental shift occurs. You are no longer shaken by her moods, terrified of her leaving, or desperate for her validation. Your sense of worth becomes internally generated, derived from your discipline, your progress, your adherence to your own code. You create a life that is deeply fulfilling with or without a partner. This self-contained completeness is your ultimate foundation. When a woman enters this world, you do not allow her illusions to rearrange the furniture. You allow her to stay only if she respects the structure you have built and contributes to its peace. If she cannot, you calmly hold the door open for her to leave. This is true leadership, not of her, but of your own life. This unwavering commitment to reality is what ultimately defines a man of substance. Women may chase fantasies for years, drawn to the drama and chaos that feel like passion. But reality always has the final say. Those fleeting illusions eventually collapse, leaving behind a trail of emptiness and broken promises. In that clarity of aftermath, she will remember the one man who stood firm, who could not be moved by her storms, who offered a quiet strength instead of frantic excitement. He becomes her reference point for what is real. And whether she returns or not becomes irrelevant, because you have transcended the need for her validation. You are already living a life of purpose, anchored in the truth that while her world may have been a captivating dream, yours is the one that was built to last.